Hi, this is Gail Tucker, and this is my video post for this week. Our topic this week is solution-focused brief therapy versus narrative therapy. So I want to talk first about narrative therapy, and it was first used or developed in the 1980s. And it's a component in our chapter of TAN 2011, which I'll use this reference throughout. Um, it's a component of marriage and family therapy in our chapter. And so, what it focuses in on is really the experience of the family through storytelling, if you will. So, it tries to take those stories or those experiences that a family has, and some of them being very negative, thus, they come to you for counseling. And the idea is to re-author these stories in a more positive or more optimistic type of viewpoint. So the family, as a unit, they change more from a problem-oriented thought to constructive thought, is one of the concepts involved. And the problems are thought of as to be external to the family rather than internal. If we always think that the problem is within in our family structure, that it's just dysfunctional, it's just how we are, we have to accept it, then there's very little room to change. But if we look at the problems as being from outside, looking in, then we can look at how we face these problems and how we deal with them, and are better able to come up with a more functional output, if you will. So this externalization, in other words, a family is empowered to change the way in which they deal with the problem rather than thinking that the problem is inherent or permanent within the characteristics of the family. So solution-focused brief therapy is something I'm more familiar with. I just completed a course in pastoral counseling with Liberty, and we used a solution-based, very brief intermittent therapy as our basic concept. So with this, it was also introduced in the 1980s, and it's more future, more goal-oriented. It can be used with individual as well as marriage and family counseling. What it does is it encourages the clients to change their language, if you will, to be more optimistic and to see problems through a new lens. So it works very well with pastoral counseling as we try to, of course, have people be imitators of Christ and to look through life through more of a biblical and more of a Christian lens. So in this sense, they're saying behavior follows language. Um, so the history of the problem in this solution-focused brief therapy, the history or the cause of the problem is really less important. It's not very much at all like more of the Freudian type theory. Um, it kind of ignores that to some extent and more looks at the present and the solution that's available by changing your outlook or your focus and your lens of the problem. So in our book in TAN of 2011, it really looks at the strengths and limitations of all the theories in family and marriage together. It doesn't really separate them out very well. So certainly some of the limitations is that these various theories that are grouped together in the family and marriage counseling are very much a systems approach. So when you look at it through a systems approach, you do fail somewhat to look at the individual. So there may be individuals in the family that are suffering from very severe mental illness that is causing some dysfunction in the family. So that certainly would be a limitation of it. Another thing is that there are lots and lots of techniques as are listed in our book. And they say that, depending on the training of the individual therapist, there's a lot of techniques to become competent at. And so maybe this is at more of a superficial level for everyone to be competent at all of these techniques. And so there was some concern that maybe there wasn't a competency with every therapist when they're trying to master all of these. Another thing that they mention as a limitation is the lack of looking at the history of the problem and more just focusing on the present, that there may certainly be some things overlooked when we do those. I thought of more of individuals within the family that are suffering from PTSD or some type of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse that happens within the family. That maybe with things like that, we certainly do need to focus in on the individual and single them out even for some individual therapy. But also that with those things, with the dynamic of the family, I don't know that you can completely ignore the history that is there and how that contributed maybe to marriage and family problems. So some of the strengths that they list in TAN 2011 is certainly in the short term, in the solution-focused brief therapy. They say that, this is anywhere from maybe 10 to 20 sessions. So it is good for people that are needing very quick, kind of rapid or crisis intervention almost. And they need some immediate gratification. They need to feel like this problem is moving along and getting solved. So that's certainly a strength of the solution-focused brief therapy. And many of the other therapies listed in here as well, since they're not all more of the psychotherapy type of theories. So it also says that because there are so many techniques available, that you can certainly individualize this, see what works with this family or with this couple. And it also says because most of these are a systems approach, that it works well with culturally diverse, ethnically diverse, and even spiritually diverse families. That maybe with the systems approach, you can delve in and kind of see how this shapes the family and what dynamics this creates within. So, and the next question is how are these theories compatible with Christian concepts? Well, I think anytime that we're trying to preserve the family or preserve a marriage, that very much goes along with Christian concepts. So, people who are in marriage and family counseling, and their goal is to maintain the family, to support the family, then that parallels with our Christian teachings. I found something from Colossians chapter 3, verse 1 through chapter 4, verse 18. It says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry." So I think that when we're doing marriage therapy, especially, I think that it's helpful to turn to the scripture to talk about those things that we're to focus on earth. Um, and I picked that scripture out for that reason, and that's from King James Bible Online, actually 2020. That's the end of my 5 minutes for my video post. And thanks anyone who takes a listen to it, and I'll take a listen to yours and do a response. Thanks a lot.